Hey friends, if you want to watch super hit movie The Foreigner in English, then you must like this video if you are visiting our channel for the first time. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, friends. In today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called The Foreigner. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it all. The interesting facts about this movie. In today's video, I'm going to tell you. I am also going to give you all the information on which op platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. So let's start the video. The turgid revenge thriller The Foreigner is an all-around lousy movie. For starters, Jackie Chan, an action star who is struggling to find age-appropriate roles in his 60s, is barely in The Foreigner, an adaptation of Stephen Leather's source novel. This is especially disappointing since Chan's Sparkle Roll Media production company is prominently foregrounded in the film's opening credits, and he's featured prominently in the film's marketing. Then again, maybe Chan's absence is for the best, given how unconvincing his performance is as grieving 61-year-old ex-military man Quan. Quan is defined by his age and his monomaniacal need to get eye-for-an-eye justice since his daughter was blown up in a bank explosion by an organization calling themselves the Authentic IRA. So Chan is heavily made up with exaggerated crow's feet, gigundo, raccoon-like bags around his eyes, and party giant quality gray streaks in his hair. He also wears a mile-long face and isn't as energetic or graceful as he has been in superior recent films like Chinese Zodiac or Railroad Tigers. Chan also tends to vanish for long stretches at a time while a bunch of British and Irish diplomats, policemen, and terrorists talk, debrief, and generally drown viewers in a convoluted story of political intrigue. Imagine all the worst parts of a Robert Ludlum novel: overlong expository dialogue, monotonous and all too brief action scenes, and a hero who can never be found when you need him, and replace Jason Bourne with Jackie Chan playing an unflattering Charles Bronson-type character, and you have The Foreigner. Much of The Foreigner revolves around the back-channel dealings of Irish diplomat Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan, a former IRA member who is now hell-bent on protecting his decades-long legacy of diplomacy with the British. So he does what any Bourne-style politico does. He gathers a bunch of guys in a boardroom, and he yells at them about how he wants to know who the authentic IRA is. Names, dates, camera footage, etc. Turn over every stone, shake every tree, climb every mountain. He wants those guys yesterday. Hennessy, an anti-hero defined by Brosnan's atrocious Irish accent and a forehead peppered with liver spots that seem to proliferate with every extreme close-up, spends a lot of time on the phone and drinking scotch. He also does what every other Bourne-style government wonk does: repeatedly curse out his men about how they're always a few steps behind the authentic IRA, and Quan, the latter of whom has declared a personal war on Hennessy since the Irishman has previously worked with the IRA. We pause to reflect on the anti-Irish British politics of The Foreigner. Why exactly do we need a movie that condemns the Irish for having a violent past, despite recent peaceful collaboration with the Brits? Why Irish terrorism, of all things, in a year where institutionalized misogyny and white nationalism have become unavoidable topics? Chan has in the past spoken out against anti-Chinese government protesters, so it's not too much of a leap in logic to imagine that his reactionary real-life politics might lead him to disdain terrorists who become politicians. Still, this is the problem he feels should be exploited for an action film? Sure, everybody from a disenfranchised Thor to a newly revived Paul Kersey wants revenge this year, but picking on the Irish is like diagnosing a gunshot victim's cankle as their most pressing concern. Of course, there's a twist that you can see coming during the first few minutes. And there's a lot of monotonous, uninspired John Rambo Bronson in the Mechanic-style booby traps and makeshift bomb shenanigans that ultimately lead to the most unintentionally funny scene of post-explosion firefighting you're likely to see this year. These guys are so bad at putting out fires that one guy repeatedly aims his hose at a fireless roof. And there's a lot of exhausting and exhaustive backstory, none of which plays to Chan's talents as a performer or director, Martin Campbell's strengths as an action filmmaker. Campbell is best known as the helmer of the franchise-reviving James Bond films Casino Royale and GoldenEye. But he was probably hired to direct The Foreigner because of his knack for cheesy revenge dramas, particularly the surprisingly okay 2010 Edge of Darkness remake. Sadly, none of that earlier film's knack for preposterous, testosterone-driven violence is here in The Foreigner, possibly because Edge of Darkness screenwriter and meathead cinema poet laureate William Monahan didn't adapt The Foreigner too. As a result, watching The Foreigner is a thoroughly dispiriting experience. You wait for characters to take a break from gabbing about Hennessy's connections with everyone from old IRA members to newer IRA members, but when Chan finally does swing into action, it's in scenes that overemphasize his character's age and lack of coordination. Chan as Quan falls over himself far too much. He clearly has some moves, but his character is supposed to be old and slow. So Chan must get pummeled twice for every blow he lands. Sadly, the blows that Chan does dish out are graceless and mechanical. The choreography of these scenes is intentionally ragged, even if Campbell films them well enough. Chan may still be figuring out what he can and can't do in his old age, but Drek, like The Foreigner, should be swiftly crossed off his bucket list and never revisited. Jackie Chan has broken a lot of bones over the years. His own and those of his unfortunate on-screen rivals, but for the life of me, I can't remember ever seeing Chan cry. But cry he does in The Foreigner, an old-fashioned one-man vendetta thriller very much in the vein of its director Martin Campbell's gnarly 1985 miniseries, Edge of Darkness, in which the opening stretch allows the action-comedy stuntmaster a chance to flex an entirely different muscle: his tear ducts. When asking nicely gets him nowhere, Quan travels to Belfast to confront Hennessy directly, planting a series of bombs in his office, his bodyguard's car, his country's safe house, to get Hennessy's attention. But Hennessy is distracted. He's busy trying to arrange his own deal for the pardons of scores of old IRA buddies and juggling complicated personal relationships with not just the movement's former leaders, any of whom could be responsible, but also his wife, Orla Brady, and mistress, Charlie Murphy, either or both of whom could also be involved. All of which makes it easy for the old man to go on running circles around the lot of us. But why, in a world with so many real human threats, does The Foreigner resurrect the troubles between Northern Ireland and the Crown? If anything, this feels giving the West a taste of its own medicine, since entertainment and elections alike have long drummed up fear and hysteria around anyone of off-white skin color, when the statistics show that mass killings are just as, if not altogether more, likely to be perpetrated by white people. In the movie, multiple Asian teens are killed in an all-too-plausible, albeit dated, act of political terrorism dreamed up and carried out by a faction of the IRA. It's an effective reminder that however scared white Londoners are of foreigners, the foreigners living among them have even more reason to be afraid, living in a country where they could wind up as collateral damage in senseless white-on-white violence. And because this time around Asians are the ones telling the story, it falls to a superstar Chinaman to set things right. The Foreigner is a 2017 action thriller film directed by Martin Campbell from a screenplay by David Marconi, based on the 1992 novel The Chinaman by Stephen Leather. A British-Chinese-American co-production starring Jackie Chan, Pierce Brosnan, Michael McElhatton, Liu Tao, Charlie Murphy, Orla Brady, and Katie Leung. The film follows a London-based Chinese Nung restaurateur and ex-soldier who seeks vengeance for the death of his daughter. The Foreigner was released in China on the 30th of September 2017 by Wuzhou Film Distribution, in the United States on the 13th of October 2017 by STX Entertainment, and in the United Kingdom on the 15th of December 2017 on Netflix. It received generally favorable reviews from critics with praise for its action sequences, musical score, and against type performances of Chan and Brosnan, but criticized its formulaic plot. The film grossed $145 million at the worldwide box office and was one of 2018's top 10 most-watched Netflix original films in the UK. Plot: Ngoc Minh Quan, a widower and Vietnam War veteran, runs a Chinese restaurant in London. His only daughter, Phan, is killed in a terrorist bombing in Knightsbridge, and an IRA splinter group dubbing itself the Authentic IRA claims responsibility. Quan visits Scotland Yard daily for information. When Commander Bromley tells him he is hindering the investigation, Quan travels to Belfast to meet Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland and Sinn Féin political advisor Liam Hennessy, a former provisional IRA leader who claims to have renounced violence, leaving the restaurant to his friend and partner Lamb. Quan contacts Hennessy and demands the names of the bombers, but Hennessy denies any knowledge, so Quan sets off a homemade bomb in Hennessy's building and leaves a fake explosive on Hennessy's car as a warning. Hennessy orders his right-hand man, Jim Kavanagh, to locate Quan and get him out of the city, and the IRA weapons dumps be searched for missing Semtex. Hennessy's henchmen track Quan, but he fights them off and escapes. Later, Quan photographs Hennessy kissing his mistress, Maggie Dunn, in a restaurant. Quan then follows Hennessy to his farmhouse, attacking it with more bombs. As Hennessy's men search for him, Quan maims them with traps before he is wounded when Kavanagh shoots him, forcing him to flee. Hennessy enlists his nephew Sean Morrison, a former Royal Irish Regiment soldier and skilled tracker, to stop Quan. Morrison negotiates with Bromley that each IRA cell will change their code words. Bromley agrees on the condition that the police will take them down. Hennessy's former IRA commander, Hugh McGrath, confronts him about the searches, accusing Hennessy of caring more about his position within the British government than the IRA's cause. A double-decker bus is blown up, but no code word is given, creating distrust between Hennessy and Bromley. Hennessy learns that Morrison unintentionally leaked information during an affair with his wife, Mary. Bromley notifies Hennessy that they have found the bomber's identity and threatens to raid his farm unless the latter questions McGrath after they track him to his farmhouse. Hennessy tortures McGrath into telling him where and who the terrorists are, which includes Maggie, whose real name is Sarah McKay. Hennessy learns that Mary masterminded the attacks because her brother was murdered by a UVF death squad and hates both the British and her husband for allowing his killers to be jailed. Hennessy kills McGrath and shares the information with Morrison. He eventually finds Quan's hideout, but Quan manages to subdue him. Sean gives him the names of the killers and their locations. After Morrison is released and returns to the farm, his uncle reprimands him for his actions and gives him one last task before he must return to New York City. Quan enters the bomber's London flat disguised as a gas man. He kills all of them except Sarah, who is wounded in the scuffle. Quan escapes just before SO-15 and MI5 storm the flat. They torture Sarah into disclosing the location of the next bomb, which is planted in a reporter's laptop to be detonated on a plane carrying British dignitaries to a conference. Airport police locate the reporter and throw the laptop into an air bridge, which explodes without any casualties. McKay is executed to tie up loose ends. British Cabinet Minister Catherine Davies, who was scheduled to be on the targeted flight, calls Hennessy to tell him she knows of his involvement, but having helped prevent the attack, he can remain as Deputy First Minister, albeit under her control. Meanwhile, Morrison kills Mary, effectively eliminating the terrorist cell. Quan confronts Hennessy with a picture showing him kissing Maggie. He forces Liam to post the photo online, publicizing his links to the terrorists. Quan returns to the restaurant and reunites with Lamb. Realizing Quan's role, Bromley decides not to take further action against Quan and keeps him under surveillance for the time being. Cast: Jackie Chan as Quan Ngoc Minh, Pierce Brosnan as Liam Hennessy, Orla Brady as Mary Hennessy, Dermot Crowley as Hugh McGrath, Ray Fearon as Commander Richard Bromley, Rory Fleck-Byrne as Sean Morrison, Michael McElhatton as Jim Kavanagh, Charlie Murphy as Maggie Dunn, Sarah McKay, Lutau as Lam, Leah Williams as Catherine Davies, Kellen Byrne as McCormick, John Cronin as Dennis Fisher, Stephen Hogan as Christy Murphy, Rufus Jones as Ian Wood, Katie Lung as Fan, Niall McNamee as Patrick O'Reilly, Aaron Monaghan as Pat Nugent, David Pierce as Billy McMahon. Production. On the 5th of June 2015, it was announced that Jackie Chan would star in the action thriller film The Foreigner for STX Entertainment, and based on Stephen Leather's novel The Chinaman. Nick Cassavetes initially signed to direct the film, which was adapted from Leather's novel by David Marconi, while Wayne Marc Godfrey was one of the producers. The film is partially set in Walworth, London. On the 15th of July 2015, Deadline reported that Martin Campbell was instead in talks to direct the film, while Relativity Media would finance 6. Campbell was paid $2 million for the film. Pierce Brosnan joined the cast alongside Chan in November. Brosnan previously starred in the 1995 film GoldenEye, directed by Campbell. Co-stars Liu Tao and Chan attended the Shanghai Film Festival on the 11th of June 2016 to promote the film. Principal photography commenced in January 2016. The filming in London of a scene involving the explosion of a bus on Lambeth Bridge caused some alarm, as people were not aware that it was a stunt. Scenes were shot at the Walters & Cohen-designed Regent High School in Camden and on Churton Street in Pimlico on the 18th of February 2016. Citation needed. Cliff Martinez composed the score. Release. The Foreigner was released theatrically in China on the 30th of September 2017 by Wuzhou Film Distribution and in the United States on the 13th of October 2017 by STX Entertainment. In the Philippines, the film was distributed by Viva International Pictures on the 18th of October 2017. Box office. The Foreigner grossed $34.4 million in the United States and Canada and $111 million in other countries for a worldwide total of $145.4 million against a production budget of $35 million. In the United States and Canada, the film opened alongside Happy Death Day, Marshall and Professor Marston, and The Wonder Women, and was expected to gross $10 to $15 million from 2,555 theaters in its opening weekend. It made $4.8 million on its first day, including $855,000 from Thursday night previews. It went on to open to $15.5 million, finishing third at the box office behind Happy Death Day and Blade Runner 2049. Home media. In the United Kingdom, the film was released on the 15th of December 2017 on Netflix. It became one of the UK's top 10 most-watched Netflix original films of 2018, with a 0.37% share of the total Netflix content consumed in the UK that year. The film was released on DVD and Blu-ray in the United States on the 9th of January 2018, and in Canada and the rest of the world on the 23rd of January. Critical response. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 66% based on 127 reviews, with an average rating of 6/10. The website's critics' consensus reads, "The Foreigner adheres strictly to action thriller formula, but benefits from committed and out-of-character performances from its talented veteran stars." On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 55 out of 100, based on 23 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A- on an A+ to F scale, while PostTrack reported 78% of filmgoers gave it a positive score. The film was viewed positively by most critics. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone gave the film 3 out of 4 stars and praised Chan's performance, saying, "It's the most dramatic role Chan has ever tackled, and he plays it with coiled intensity and raw emotional power." Clarence Tsui of The Hollywood Reporter also praised Chan, writing, "It's good to see Chan swapping his happy-go-lucky persona for 2 hours for some gravitas as a tragic rogue with a marked past." John Barra of Screen Daily praised the action sequences, Cliff Martinez's score, and the direction, stating, "Campbell's unfussy style works well with Chan's choreography. The star's willingness to look at his 63 years makes the falls look like they hurt and creates a sense of jeopardy when Quan finds himself outnumbered." He also observed that the film never commits the cinematic sin of suggesting that terrorism is a threat that can be readily dispatched with a few one-liners. Ignacy Vishnevetsky for the AV Club described the film as good, lean cut of meat. In other words, a typical Martin Campbell movie, expeditious and cold-blooded in its cross-cut, cloak-and-dagger plotting and violence. The Chicago Reader also commended the performances of Chan and Brosnan and called The Foreigner a twisty, bracing political thriller, giving Chan room to display his dramatic ability. The Times of India gave a positive review of Campbell's direction and the film's suspense, stating that it can keep viewers engrossed. In more mixed reviews, Peter DeBrugge of Variety wrote, "The Foreigner amounts to an above-average but largely by-the-numbers action movie in which Chan does battle with generic thugs and shadowy political forces." Glenn Kenny, writing in the New York Times, stated Chan doesn't deliver the action pizzazz here that he used to, criticized the plot as convoluted, and felt that the use of the IRA as antagonists were outdated about current events. Potential sequel. In January 2016, The New Yorker quoted Jackie Chan in conversation with then STX chairman Adam Fogelson as having suggested that a female character in The Foreigner, who had been killed off in the script, had been kept alive so as to save her for number 2. Now the IRA goes after her, and that's the story. On said meeting with Chan and the concept of The Foreigner number 2 sequel, Fogelson then remarked, "A few years ago, thinking about the sequel that way would be characterized as a lazy, greedy bastardization of the creative process. If you said that now, you'd be telling the entire world that they're wrong. Sequels have become a duty, a form of storytelling that, thanks to great television, audiences have grown accustomed to. You can aspire to create 6 two-hour movies that develop your concept across multiple resolutions, which makes movies easier to sell and creates a more predictable business model. Half the films we'll say yes to will have sequelable potential." A slightly odd confluence of factors make Martin Campbell's The Foreigner a splendid action thriller. The picture reunites James Bond veterans Campbell and Pierce Brosnan, but then throws in a healthy dose of the Northern Irish troubles and a top-of-his-game Jackie Chan for good measure. It has taken me quite a while to get to this 2017 effort, but it well worth tracking down. An unexpected bombing kills the daughter of Vietnamese restaurateur Ngoc Minh Quan, Chan. When a splinter faction of the IRA claims responsibility, Quan goes looking to Northern Ireland for answers, and face-to-face with Deputy First Minister Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan. While Quan makes use of a growing number of violent tactics to avenge his daughter, Hennessy races against the clock, save his former comrades and his career. For half of the time, The Foreigner is a tense political thriller about Sinn Féin statesmen fighting to stop Republican radicals from kick-starting the bloody past IRA terrorism all over again. For the other half, it is an old-fashioned one-man-against-an-army revenge thriller, the likes of which have littered popular cinema for decades. The two narratives are nicely intertwined and make something relatively fresh and very entertaining. Out of their archetypal ingredients. It is a superb film for Jackie Chan, who really needs to flex his dramatic muscles more often. This is arguably his most grounded role since Shinjuku Incident 2009, and it is the sort of serious, harder fare on which he should be focused. Brosnan has been going from strength to strength in recent years, ably shaking off his old James Bond persona with apparent ease. He is great here, morally compromised, packed with equal parts regret and rage, and more than willing to get his hands dirty when pushed into a corner. Between the two leads, there is a strong, gritty texture to The Foreigner. Nobody is entirely evil or noble. Bad people can have a sympathetic edge. Good people can be led to do bad things. A solid supporting cast also deserve praise. In particular, both Orla Brady and Charlie Murphy do very decent work in a pair of underwritten roles. Martin Campbell directs it all with a steady hand and a well-developed eye for both action and tension. It is not quite the masterpiece of his Casino Royale, but it does demonstrate a well-honed sense of when to cut and what to show or hide from the audience. What is particularly nice is that it simply does not feel like a Hollywood production. Everything feels a little too bleak and complicated. Adult-leaning fare like this feels like a scarce resource in the face of franchise blockbusters and shared universes. I mean, it's not. There is plenty of decent, non-toyetic filmmaking going on every week, but it rarely gets the spotlight that it deserves. The Foreigner is smart, fast-paced, and satisfying entertainment. Based on Stephen Leather's novel The Chinaman and directed by the man at the helm of Casino Royale, 2006, Martin Campbell. 2017's The Foreigner is a revenge thriller that is part First Blood, 1982 levels of creative brutality and part political drama regarding the rights and wrongs of IRA-led terrorism and the ongoing conflicts of interest between the central United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. There may be a little too much going on and one too many characters to truly have the chance to care about, but The Foreigner is an effective piece nonetheless, offering a glimpse at a darker and more damaged side of Jackie Chan not often seen in Western cinema, and certainly worth an intrigued glance. This is by no means perfect, but it does have a lot more going for it than first meets the eye. The Foreigner is about as well shot and visually constructed as you could expect from a $35 million movie littered with action sequences and expensive explosions. So while the visual style not turn heads like Guillermo del Toro's slightly cheaper The Shape of Water managed to do, this element of the film certainly didn't detract from the qualities of the piece either. Instead of getting carried away in constructing beautifully colored scenes of striking visual imagery, Campbell instead pointed the camera at his two lead actors, Brosnan and Chan, and gave the experienced duo every opportunity to create convincing characters with raw and almost roughed-up performances that ultimately led the film with great effectiveness, with Chan being particularly refreshing as a stoic and war-torn veteran looking for vengeance. In recent years, Chan's growing age and diminishing physical capabilities have brought into question his abilities as a stunt worker turned big-screen martial arts master. Yet while his moments of intense physical performance are perhaps lesser in The Foreigner than in previous works, these moments act as useful crescendos to narrative tension that help to build the same indestructible tough guy persona that Chan has managed to build for himself in real life over the decades. Campbell, seemingly conscious of the possible issues, masked Chan's lesser abilities, skills still far exceeding the ordinary human, behind creatively vicious action scenes reminiscent of the first John Rambo outing in 1982's First Blood or the more recent Bourne franchise, with some sequences being almost lifted directly from these two inspirations. Elements of the picture that only help to bring more of a vicious reality to a story that you either go along for the ride with or quickly grow frustrated with, courtesy of a narrative littered with too many side characters and underdeveloped plot lines. If you've got an inch of respect for Jackie Chan and can strap yourself into seeing him as a grisly, broken-down old man with a major chip on his shoulder, then The Foreigner will be a lot of fun. But if you're more about films making sense and exploring deeper meanings in any level of great detail, then this may be a film you quickly turn off from. It's not half bad, but it's hardly earth-shattering either, owing much of its success to a very good Jackie Chan performance that masked its lack of effort regarding its own politics. The Foreigner is The Foreigner. Movie review. The Foreigner is adapted from English author Stephen Leather's The Chinaman, which he wrote while working for The Times during an IRA bombing campaign. The director, Martin Campbell, a veteran filmmaker, wastes little time getting going, and I appreciated it. We're introduced to Ngok Min Kwan, Jackie Chan, and his daughter Fan, Katie Leung, and not 10 minutes go by before the shop Fan enters explodes, killing her instantly. A grief-stricken Kwan languishes about his home and business in a daze before leaving his friends behind and vowing to find and punish the people responsible for Fan's death. The film itself is little more than a dad movie update, defined by Movie Bob as hard-bitten action dramas starring gracefully aging older male stars as omnicompetent badasses who solve their problems through methodical masculine determination and nigh superhuman fighting prowess, implicitly the result of their life experience and having survived into the weak and wimpy present from an age when men were men. See also The Expendables, Jack Reacher, and the recent filmography of Liam Neeson. That's just fine. I like The Equalizer and I like this movie. However, it's not perfect. The film is incredibly predictable, and I called the film's plot beat by beat from its halfway mark. The film hits its stride when showcasing action. Martin Campbell, GoldenEye, Casino Royale, effectively gets the most out of the action set pieces. The narrative itself consists of forays into English-Irish politics, specifically with regards to the IRA and Quan's dogged search for his daughter's killers. A subject I know little to nothing about, I found the film's exploration of the IRA's organization and politics intriguing. Besides the Irish politics and its slick action scenes, the only other area of the film that really shines is the two leads characters. Jackie Chan performs in a refreshing change of pace as Quan, and he is the emotional heart of the film. Campbell gives the audience just enough time to sympathize with Quan as he grieves before he begins his righteous quest of vengeance. Jackie's stunts are not overdone nor ridiculous, and while he is portrayed as being almost superhuman in his abilities, it never crosses the line into absurdity. Quan narrowly escapes capture several times and gets battered throughout the film. Jackie is old now, and the film acknowledges this reality. Quan doesn't assault anyone directly until the film's climax, but rather cleverly wages a guerrilla war of stealth, attrition, and embarrassment on Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan, and the IRA. Despite Quan's rage at the death of his daughter and his tenacity in bringing the killers to justice, Quan kills very few people. This is a nice touch by the filmmakers, and probably due to Jackie's family-friendly image, but it adds to Quan's character. He consistently has the upper hand on Hennessy and his men, but doesn't kill them because he only seeks to find the men who were directly responsible for Fan's murder. He's not the Punisher or Charles Bronson from Death Wish. He's a broken man who wants justice for his daughter. As good as Jackie Chan is, Pierce Brosnan is equally fantastic as Liam Hennessy, a high-ranking IRA member turned politician. Hennessy is an older, weary man who is tired of fighting, but still willing to use unscrupulous means to achieve his goals. A former violent, passionate IRA member, he still commands considerable respect, despite advocating for peace. A man now accustomed to power and respect, he is caught tremendously off guard when things start falling apart. A steadfast fighter in his own right, Hennessy struggles to navigate a complicated, deadly political landscape while facing the English government, Quan, and his own IRA at odds with him. At the screening this critic attended, the audience's chattering, phone-fiddling exasperation was palpable, even in an upmarket cinema located in the cosmopolitan city of Shenzhen. Still, The Foreigner should easily recoup its reported $35 million budget in China alone, and Chan's fans and action flick aficionados will embrace it when it opens in Australia, the US, and Russia on October 12 and 13. British audiences who could potentially relate to the story the most are still out of The Foreigner's equation, with release dates in the UK as yet unconfirmed. In the film's opening scene, Chan's pensioner-aged London-based restaurateur Nguyen Minh Quoc is shown driving his daughter Fan, Katie Lung, Cho Chang in the Harry Potter franchise, to a party. Just moments after waving goodbye to her, she's dead, the victim of a bomb attack at the restaurant to which she was going. Quoc learns of how a band of terrorists from Northern Ireland orchestrated the bombing. Mired in a mix of grief and fury, a mental state Chan conveys surprisingly well, Quoc drops everything and heads to Belfast to get more information about Fan's killers. His target is one Liam Hennessy, Brosnan, a leading Northern Ireland politician who has swapped his paramilitary past for a career in mainstream politics. His secret dealings with the British authorities risk putting his career or even his life in peril. With much bigger fish to fry, Hennessy meets Quoc, but rebuffs his demand to know the identities of those who killed his daughter. But he has underestimated this seemingly meek restaurant owner. Quoc's swift retaliation is to blow up the toilet of Hennessy's well-guarded office with a bomb created out of groceries. And this is just the start of the China-born, Vietnam-raised, and U.S.-trained mercenaries' relentless campaign to force Hennessy to deliver names. As the politician seeks refuge at his country villa, Quoc follows, camping out in the woods and then terrorizing his security guard, and finally confronting the man himself again. Quoc's incredible dexterity during the fights might be at odds with the slow and shuffling figure he cuts at the beginning of the film, but at least Chan manages to hold his usual comical streak back. He infuses all these scenes with ample grit and power, every blow and thud amplified by the film's sound design. Quoc has one more big hurrah, unleashing violent revenge on the baddies. Then again, his exploits could be seen as distracting from the main story about Hennessy, who has to confront dissent from a splinter paramilitary group and betrayal among his ranks and within his family. The chaos also reveals how he has sold out his ideals for a life of corrupting power, illicit lovers, and clandestine deals with the British authorities which he once fought against as a young street fighter. While all this is happening to the politician in London and Belfast, Kwok's presence is easily forgotten. Brosnan returns to his Irish roots with a vibrant performance as the conflicted and confused Hennessy, a character screenwriter David Marconi has modeled on real politicians. He wears a beard like the Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams and has a career trajectory like the late Martin McGuinness, a former Irish Republican Army commander who eventually became Northern Ireland's Deputy First Minister. While Brosnan has quite a few opportunities to show his acting chops, Chan makes do with less. The original novel contained much more about Kwok's motivations and deeds. In any case, it's good to see Chan swapping his happy-go-lucky persona for 2 hours for some gravitas as a tragic rogue with a marked past. I went into The Foreigner expecting it to be a painfully bad Jackie Chan's Taken. Instead, it's quite good. The perfect action thriller that you'd stumble across on TNT on a rainy Saturday afternoon while flipping channels and find yourself sucked into it for the next 2 hours. I mean, TNT does know drama. The setup is simple. An IRA bomb blows up in London and kills a dozen people, one of whom is the teenage daughter of Jackie Chan's character, Kwan. Normally, this is the point in the review where I would snark about not bothering to look up the character's name, because Jackie Chan, for all his joyous personality and impossible physicality, only ever plays one character, all variations on Jackie Chan. Much like Statham always stars as Statham, Jackie Chan is always Jackie Chan. Not so here. Chan drops some acting on the screen. Kwan is quiet and gentle, his few words of dialogue before the tragedy pure dad humor. And afterwards, he brings a devastated gravitas to every scene, not playing for a moment into some Liam Neeson growling revenge fantasy. He is Jackie Chan, of course, and brings the martial arts to bear, but he conveys every action with a heavy world weariness. He speaks softly, he asks the same questions over and over with a dull monotony born of seeing horror over and over again. There's no melodrama to it, no action movie grittiness. And while he has a very specific set of skills, it's not a character of taglines and dramatic entries, just the sad exhaustion of a man who has lost everything going through the only motions he knows. The acting is fantastic all around. When Pierce Brosnan showed up in the first few minutes, when I still assumed I was in for a lousy ripoff of Taken, I thought to myself, why in the world is Brosnan in this? It became clear pretty quickly, because he read the goddamn script. Brosnan gets to play the weaselly backstabbing nominal head of the IRA, Liam Hennessy. The Gerry Adams sort who has as much blood on his hands as the worst of them, but parlayed that into a seat playing both sides at the table in peacetime. He's conniving, weak, and duplicitous without ever becoming a cartoon. But while the movie is centered on Kwan in its narrative, its world isn't centered on him, doesn't revolve around him. This is a taut thriller, and aren't all good thrillers taut? Economies are robust, cultures are vibrant, and thrillers are taut. In 2 hours of runtime, this movie packs in a host of characters. The black chief of security running the investigation, the female MP running the political side of things, a half-dozen distinct IRA bosses and soldiers, the reporter working the story, the bombing team themselves, Hennessy's wife, Hennessy's mistress, Hennessy's former Special Forces nephew. This film should feel bloated and rushed, and instead it feels perfect and populated. Every one of those characters fully realized with a few brushstrokes so that they feel in moments like real living and breathing people who are serving as protagonists in their own stories rather than plot points in another's. There are schemes within schemes, in a tale so messy it feels exactly like the real world, with no neat answers and no clean resolutions. It also never makes the mistake of cartoonish escalation. It's a story that feels very grounded in the real world, where a dozen dead in a bombing is nationally mobilizing, where another bombing threatens to drag down decades of peace. This isn't a world that goes the action movie route of CGI demolitions of entire city blocks. It knows how to make the story matter more by keeping it tight and focused. The Foreigner feels like a throwback to the sort of thrillers we got in the 70s and 80s. It feels like early Clancy or Ludlum or maybe Le Carre put up on the screen. And that makes sense. It's based on a 1992 novel called The Chinaman by Stephen Leather. I'd love to hear the story of how the hell this becomes a decent film in 2017. I remember reading a few Stephen Leather novels 20 years back. They're not good, as I recall. Second-tier dark and gritty Ludlum ripoffs for the most part. And I see on Wikipedia he's written dozens of novels since then. So why? Why does a random novel from a quarter century ago by this guy get optioned for a movie and then somehow end up being a decent movie to top it all off? The Foreigner is an entertaining revenge thriller that was released in 2017 to considerable acclaim. The fact that the cast is led by the perhaps unlikely combination of Pierce Brosnan and Jackie Chan makes it interesting. But there's more to the film, script by David Marconi, source material a novel by Stephen Leather, than that. It's fair to say that the acclaim wasn't universal. A review on the usually insightful Roger Ebert website calls it an all-round lousy movie. But don't take too much notice of that, since the critical acumen of the reviewer, who is plainly not the late Roger Ebert, can be judged by the fact that he regards Brosnan's Irish accent as atrocious. Oh dear. Anyway, Chan plays a chap called Kwan, who is leading a quiet life in London when his daughter is murdered in a terrorist incident. He determines to find out who is responsible and mete out his own kind of justice. So far, so very straightforward, but the story gains depth from the way in which Kwan targets Brosnan's character, Liam Hennessy. Hennessy, who bears a disconcerting resemblance to a prominent Irish politician in reality, is presented as a dodgy character in his personal life as well as in his political machinations. He is emphatically not responsible for the attack which killed Kwan's daughter, but Kwan is right to believe that such an influential figure is bound to know where, to coin a phrase, the bodies are buried. The political dimensions to the story don't get in the way of the action, which is effectively done, but not overdone. Jackie Chan's age makes him an unlikely action man, but he gives a good performance and the implausibilities of the story are addressed quite well in the script, with the tension maintained to the end. I enjoyed it, and so it should be said, did a large majority of the reviewers. Pierce Brosnan can make idle chatter about vaping sound like Shakespearean verse. I ask him about his stance on vaping, mostly as a lark, mentioning that he played a constantly vaporizing drug baron in last year's offbeat thriller Urge, and still he manages a typically flowery, grandiloquent response. It's nauseating, a disgusting habit, completely ridiculous, Brosnan tells me on the phone. Young men and women sitting in their cars, with this billowing, titanic bulge of fake smoke spilling out of their mouth. I guess it's of the time. It'll go down in the history books as one of the crazier things people have done. You can vape yourself to sleep now, I've read. And better still, he uses that role for a seamless pivot to a trenchant insight about the current state of his working life. I'm at a point in my career where I can move around the map and have a great time doing it. I can pull off the occasional unexpected surprise and, all along, enjoy the work. This might come off as the usual promotion via praise actors trot out on press tours, but there's an earnestness to his words. Brosnan doesn't trade in backslapping like so many of his Hollywood peers. He's charming but serious, and as a dual Irish-American citizen, he's concerned about the attitude towards immigration in the U.S. I think this business with DACA is so cruel, he says. What it's doing to young men and women's lives, tearing apart families. It is an unnecessary cruelty. I became an American citizen in the George W. Bush years, having come to America and paid taxes with an American wife and American sons. I wanted to become an American citizen, and happily did so in order to have a vote, so I could decide the future of my family. Like an older Bond who's learned to go easier on himself, he's taken to globe-trotting and leisure, recently seen palling around with Bill Clinton. While he's never been lacking in confidence, recent years have seen Brosnan gaining in perspective and self-knowledge. He appreciates the many trials he's been dealt for building his character and thickening his skin a touch. It's a capricious old game, the world of being an actor, he says. The pitfalls are many, and you have to be tough as old boots to stay at the table. I came in knowing full well it's hard to be a great actor, and hard to be a good actor. But when you see great acting and good acting, it's just intoxicating, and that's what I wanted to be. But what is it that differentiates a good and a great actor? The great acting comes from Daniel Day-Lewis, Anthony Hopkins, Ralph Fiennes, Tom Hardy, he says. The good acting comes from, well, Daniel Day-Lewis, Anthony Hopkins, etc. Players have their moments, it's just that some have those moments constantly. The day after our interview, he's scheduled to ship out to Europe for hotly anticipated sequel, Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. Mentioning it at all initially sounds like a well-placed plug for an upcoming feature, until Brosnan hooks another hard conversational left and waxes poetic on his long personal relationship with the great nation of Croatia. As he recalls filming a miniseries in the former Yugoslavia, just up the road from the front line of Croatia's War of Independence, a single parent raising a child while working one of the planet's more demanding jobs, one gets the impression he's got a million stories like this. Actually not too bad, considering where else it could have gone. Martin Campbell's career has never always been the most consistent, but when he's at his best, he can assuredly create an exciting action scene. Among many reasons, his Bond films are among the best of the bunch. At his worst, however, he seems to have no control over what he wishes to tell. The Legend of Zorro, Green Lantern. With that having been said, it's also fitting enough to say that Jackie Chan is always a delight to watch in the action genre when the film gives him enough room to work with, leaving part of me to hope that this would be a chance for the better side of Martin Campbell to show itself once again. To some extent, it was worth it, for The Foreigner proved itself to be much better than it had much capacity to be, even if its more lackluster elements still are noticeable. Jackie Chan stars as Ngoc Minh Quan, a Vietnam War veteran living in London as a Chinese restaurant owner, putting his past behind him up until the moment his daughter dies in a politically motivated terrorist attack. After her own death, he swears revenge on the murderers, and even pursues a government official who may have connections with the bombers. Perhaps the story itself isn't the strongest suit of The Foreigner because of the rather predictable plot threads that come and go, but even the film's weaknesses seem overshadowed by moments of ingenuity that don't seem expected for the sort of film it would be. Maybe not always as suspenseful as it seems built up to be, but for what it is, entertaining enough it retains. Campbell's knack for creating an action sequence is present, but it seems as if this is where Jackie Chan's best moments on the screen come about, rather than humanity behind his own tragic backstory, which we see in glimpses and only feels rushed at that. They're moments that feel like they could have created more impact had they been expanded upon. But they disappear along with Chan's presence for a good amount of the second half, where he just feels relegated towards one area the whole time. Nevertheless, when he comes on the screen, he does deliver a thrilling action sequence one after another, only showing that Jackie Chan hasn't lost what made him the wonderful action star he had been recognized as over the years. It's a good use of his own talent, if anything else could be said, even if we know he still can manage to provide better. There's no secret present that The Foreigner is a politically motivated film. Now, with the government official being surrounded at his own ends with acts of terrorism, ultimately becoming his own responsibility. Now set to be taken down by an Asian, an older woman, and a black police officer. When the novel was written, it was a plausible enough premise because of what was going on in the United Kingdom at the time. So perhaps in response to how America is running its own government, it would only make clear that The Foreigner seems angry and calls like a warning, if the development of Brosnan's character arc says enough, from his own rise and fall as his own history as a former IRA member catches up behind him. It's a tad troubling, though, when The Foreigner seems to have no idea about how to set the tone of its own societal commentary. For the most part, it seems bent towards forming vicious action scene after another, almost in a campy nature at that, especially with where Jackie Chan's character has been reduced to in the second half of the film. Quan seems absent in the strangest sense considering he is the film's leading force. It isn't the same campiness that ultimately has rendered the commentary of a work like Starship Troopers even stronger. but one that only seems distracting in some sense just when trying to piece together what the foreigner wishes to say. It can't establish a tone that gives itself a new identity, but the occasional bits of brilliance make it more enjoyable. Even if the tone of what I wrote prior seems rather negative, I can still say with ease that I enjoyed The Foreigner on the count that seeing Jackie Chan doing what he does best as an action star once again was truly satisfying. Martin Campbell's skills as an action director do make themselves clear again, but his own faults as a storyteller are present. Nevertheless, it's nice to see how The Foreigner manages to tie in with the current political climate, especially in its anger towards government officials. Maybe it isn't the most subtle, but it makes for a good way to pass time. The first thing that seems strange about The Foreigner is its title. Sure, Jackie Chan's character is Chinese and he lives in London, but no one ever calls him The Foreigner. Instead, most of the characters refer to him as the Chinaman. They call him that so much, in fact, that it feels like that could be the title and would have been in an earlier age. At the screening this critic attended, the audience's chattering, phone-fiddling exasperation was palpable, even in an upmarket cinema located in the cosmopolitan city of Shenzhen. Still, The Foreigner should easily recoup its reported $35 million budget in China alone, and Chan's fans and action flick aficionados will embrace it when it opens in Australia, the US, and Russia on October 12 and 13. British audiences who could potentially relate to the story the most are still out of The Foreigner's equation, with release dates in the UK as yet unconfirmed. Jackie Chan for the win. Of all the actors you've seen in a film or television, can you name one that appears to love their job more than Chan? You know when you hear he's in a new movie, you are in. You don't even need to know the title, just when the film opens in a theater near you. Thus, I present to you The Foreigner, a movie in which a 94-year-old Chan fights the IRA. Okay, so Chan is actually just 63, but the makeup people for The Foreigner made him look old enough to have witnessed the birth of flight. Don't worry, he still gets to kick some ass. Also, IRA means what you think it means, Irish Republican Army. This film is based on a book published in 1992 called The Chinaman by Stephen Leather. If you know anything about the IRA besides bombings, it is that the official peace between the IRA and the United Kingdom happened in 1998. Having been written prior to 1998, the plot of the novel is the Chinaman getting revenge for the death of his daughter from one of the bombings. The film takes place in 2017, and this being 2017, a couple of things were changed about the story to make it current. The first thing they changed was the title, because the main character in the novel is Vietnamese. While the movie mostly features Brits and Irish, the productions companies behind the film are all Chinese. I know next to nothing about Chinese culture or politics, but I'm guessing they must not be very keen on a Vietnamese, revenge-bent, special forces soldier murdering people being referred to as a Chinaman. I'll even go so far as to guess they frown upon Vietnamese people in general being referred to as Chinamen, and vice versa. So Chan plays Ngoc Minh Quan, a Vietnamese, revenge-bent special forces soldier murdering far fewer people. Not having read the novel, I can't say how much they changed the character, but Quan is very restrained in the killing department. Note, they also made a minor change to the character's name for the film, which I have no explanation for at all. The screenwriter also had to have added or modified Pierce Brosnan's character, Liam Hennessy. Liam is the First Minister of Northern Ireland, but was a former bigwig in the IRA. I'm assuming the book has a very similar character because both book and film have the protagonist demanding the names of the bombers responsible for his daughter's death. Anyway, Quan goes to the British police first to get names and meets with Commander Bromley, Ray Fearon, who assures Quan that his top priority is identifying and catching the bombers. Bromley is telling the truth too, because we see him and his team chasing clues and homing in on IDs throughout the film. Of course, it wouldn't be a very entertaining movie if Quan heeded Bromley's advice to be patient, so Quan redirects his focus to Liam, whom Quan believes knows who the bombers are. As with Bromley, Liam assures Quan that he does not know who the bombers are, but is trying to find out. Unlike with Bromley, Quan believes Liam is lying and enacts Plan B, where B is for bomb. Recalling his special forces training, Quan resorts to terrorism to frighten Liam into giving up the names. This is where the movie is a bit weak. It's a safe assumption that Quan thinks the only thing an ex-IRA member would understand is violence, but he never hints at that rationale. He just jumps straight to bomb it out, though doesn't kill anyone and does everything possible to limit the injuries. This is weak writing because while his motivation is solid, his jump to violence seemingly comes out of nowhere. We don't find out about his training until much, much later in the film. While nobody is going to root against Old Man Chan taking on the IRA, it is hard to root for Quan at first, especially when everything we've been shown and told so far is that Liam and Bromley really are trying to find out who are the killers. At this point, I'm kind of with Bromley. Quan should just be patient. Forgiving that is pretty easy, though. While that part of the writing is weak, other parts are quite strong. The cat-and-mouse game between Liam and Quan is pretty entertaining, especially as Quan ramps up the terror. In addition, we know almost immediately that someone within the IRA ranks is trying to restart the bloodshed. What's fun is that Brosnan does an excellent job of showing exasperation at being harassed by Quan because he really doesn't know the identities of the bombers. Not to be outdone, Chan is remarkably sad and morose and comes off like your grandpa. Well, until he starts blowing things up. That is. As entertaining as the movie is, I do have one more criticism. There is one too many investigator in this movie. At no point do Quan and Bromley's investigations overlap with each other or help hinder each other. Each of them solve the puzzle independently, so are redundant. Since we came this movie to see Jackie Chan kick someone, Bromley and team should have been reduced down to brushing off Quan multiple times, then disappearing from the film. It would have been as easy as Liam requesting a few days to ferret out the bombers to remove the cops from the film and let us focus more on Quan and his campaign of guerrilla warfare. Again, forgiving those minor writing issues are easy with this film. Watching Quan morph from a hobbled old man to an IRA member's nightmare is borderline cathartic. I also like the subtle commentary on how the decades of bombings and shootings only ever lead to death, and not an independent and unified Ireland like the IRA wanted. It's a clear allegory to the current state of affairs in the Middle East, though nobody in a position of power on any side of the conflict is going to see this movie and have a change of heart, unfortunately for all of the innocent people who are caught up in the bullshit. If allegories aren't your thing, just enjoy the 63-year-old centenarian terrorizing a bunch of assholes. That's always worth the price of admission, directed by Martin Campbell. Starring Jackie Chan, Pierce Brosnan, Rufus Jones, Charlie Murphy, and Orla Brady. The story of humble London businessman Quan Chan, whose long-buried past erupts in a revenge-fueled vendetta when the only person left for him to love, his teenage daughter, is taken from him in a senseless act of politically motivated terrorism. In his relentless search for the identity of the terrorists, Quan is forced into a cat-and-mouse conflict with a British government official, Brosnan, whose own past may hold clues to the identities of the elusive killers. Jackie Chan's career in the West has been a mixed bag, to put it mildly. Even at the height of his popularity west of China, in Rush Hour and Shanghai Noon, etc., he was doing affable, if disposable, entertainment. The trouble was, among his better aforementioned works, he was doing dreadful films like The Spy Next Door and The Tuxedo. Those sort of, remember them? Films which people only hazily recall when it reappears on one of those obscure Freeview channels that you rarely ever even flick to because they're so near the wobbling boobs channels at the arse end of the listings. Or worse yet, it's on Channel 5. The problem extended, though, because upon returning to China and having worked solidly, he has been stuck in something of a mediocre rut on the whole. Chan's films begin to seem outdated and half-hearted. He's always good value and he's always giving 100%, but he has attached himself to the wrong projects. Whilst die-hard fans of his classic Hong Kong period cannot accept that time has taken its toll on a man who is no longer in his prime and can't jump off 30-foot-high buildings with no crash mats. Chan is excellent, though. It's a committed and heartfelt performance. He tries to offer another layer to it, but the writing is just not there. Brosnan is on good form too, but the rest of the cast are decidedly ordinary. In the fisticuffs department, there are some solid action scenes as you would expect from Chan and Campbell combining, but the film stops still too often and needs more energy. When it ignites, it's a good watch and there are good set pieces. This also offers an intensity we don't often see from Chan. The Foreigner is a really interesting film because it is a film with a lot of moving parts, and it is delving into an area and setting you don't see very often these days. However, while some parts of this film are simply amazing, others just don't work at all, which creates a kind of juxtaposition. You'll be sitting there during these moments of high intensity or fascinating filmmaking, but then something from the story will just rip you out of it. So today what we will do after setting the scene is break down this juxtaposition. So in the end, do we recommend The Foreigner? Well, yes and no. When The Foreigner works, it is amazing, and when it doesn't, it is at best a drag, and at worst deeply problematic. At the very least, I would say go see it to see some of Jackie Chan's best acting, and to see him take down Bond. I mean, not really, but it is fun to think. Also, he sings the theme song, and come on, that's kinda cool. The Foreigner and thought Jackie Chan wants to get some of that Taken action. Then you, like me, will be pleasantly surprised that The Foreigner is not a Taken knockoff. It's a revenge thriller, so it's in the same genre, but The Foreigner has more in common with John Wick, in that it's dumb in a smart way. The plot is 1990s action movie stupid, but it is also straightforward, and all information relates back to the plot. It's a very tight, clean narrative. Characters are given just enough texture to be believable, everyone's motivations are clear, and everyone behaves in accordance with those motivations. Too often, movies like this throw out the rulebook for the sake of spectacle, but The Foreigner never sacrifices its own logic for a cheap thrill. Adapted from a 1992 novel by Stephen Leatherman called The Chinaman, which explains a lot about the 90s vibes, The Foreigner, good title upgrade, stars Jackie Chan as Kwang Gok Min, the alert bordering on overprotective father of teenaged Fan, Katie Leung, aka Cho Chang. They live in London, where Kwan owns a restaurant, and Fan is excited to go to a school dance. A bomb planted by the new IRA, however, kills Fan and sets Kwan on a nothing-left-to-lose path of revenge. Enters smarmy Belfast politician Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan, who is Irish, sporting a hilarious Northern Irish accent, who has ties to the 1.0 version of the IRA and has been the first deputy second minister of Irish troubles since the armistice. If you're not totally up on the current state of Anglo-Irish relations, this might be a little confusing, and it required some Googling on my part after the movie. Honestly, I still don't really know what Liam Hennessy's job is, except that he's ex-IRA and involved with the British government, which is really all that matters. The Foreigner is generally good at skating past fine print in favor of getting on with the story, but when trying to remember what Liam did for this review, I drew a blank. What is emphasized is that Liam is ex-IRA and still has contacts with that crowd. That's why, in his grief, Kwan zeroes in on Liam, looking for answers regarding who killed his daughter. Through their contact, it is revealed that Kwan has his own particular set of skills, and he uses them to increasingly dramatic effect to try and flush out answers when Liam proves cagey. Like all Jackie Chan movies, The Foreigner features lots of action and terrific stunts, but you may notice that, unlike all Jackie Chan movies, the action sequences are shorter and less frequent than in Chan's heyday. He is now in his 60s, and a lifetime of bone-crunching stunt work has clearly taken a toll. He can still deliver, but there's a calculation about his fight choreography now. When he goes for it, he really goes for it. But the film is designed to not make him go for it too much, and also emphasizes his age by showing Kwan taking his fair share of licks. Chan isn't invincible, and now no longer are his characters. This puts a more human face on the movie, though, because Chan can't do non-stop action, he actually gets to act. He's always been underrated for his actual acting ability, and with Kwan he's got something to chew on, playing Kwan's suicide mission with a burnt-out fatalism that makes more sense as the movie progresses, and we learn more about Kwan's past. The extra non-action room also allows for Liam Hennessy to be fleshed out more than your usual B-movie bad guy. There is, in fact, a very satisfying subplot on Liam's side of the story about his nephew, Sean, Rory Fleckburn, the Quiet Ones, which would not exist in a dumber movie. The Foreigner is not breaking new ground. Besides the tangle of Anglo-Irish politics, it's not a hard movie to track, but it is exceptionally well made and goes a long way to restoring director Martin Campbell after Green Lantern's belly flop, and the performances of Chan and Brosnan are really solid. It might look like Taken, but don't be fooled. Plot: the story of humble London businessman Quan Chan, whose long-buried past erupts in a revenge-fueled vendetta when the only person left for him to love, his teenage daughter, is taken from him in a senseless act of politically motivated terrorism. In his relentless search for the identity of the terrorists, Quan is forced into a cat-and-mouse conflict with a British government official, Brosnan, whose own past may hold clues to the identities of the elusive killers. Review: it's been a while since Jackie Chan has starred in a truly great film, but from the trailers it looked like The Foreigner might see him back on form. I am happy to report that this is one of Chan's finest hours and also one of the best action movies of the year. There is little to no humor in this movie, which you can tell from the trailers. This is a more serious Jackie Chan in my favorite kind of role. After his daughter is killed in an IRA bombing, he is filled with grief, which quickly turns to rage, and he wants to find the people responsible. When he finds out that a government official, Pierce Brosnan, called Liam Hennessy, may know who the perpetrators are, Quan will stop at nothing to get some answers. Chan barely says anything in this movie, but his face expresses more than words could say. He is broken and has lost his entire family, so you are behind him every step of the way. What is interesting about the story is that you aren't sure if Liam Hennessy is actually responsible, and you begin to question Quan's sanity, and if this really is the right path for him to take. By Dong, this is he any different from the terrorists who killed his family? Brosnan is on fine form and looking remarkably similar to Sinn Féin leader Jerry Adams, and it's one of his most complex roles to date. We find out he has several skeletons in his closet, but does that make him connected to the bombings? Well, you'll just have to watch it and find out. After the explosive opening scene, the pace slows a little so we get to know our protagonist-antagonist, but when the action kicks in, it hits hard. Although the fight scenes aren't quite as epic as, say, Wheels on Meals or Drunken Master, Chan still proves he can kick ass with the best of them, and despite his advancing years, he is still one of the greatest action stars on the planet. He goes full First Blood at one point as he takes out multiple goons with ease in a forest, and he is clearly doing a lot of his own stunts. There is also no noticeable CGI, so we get real explosions and set pieces which never fail to impress. The fact that it focuses on a real threat like a rogue faction of the IRA gives the story extra resonance, and at no point do you think a scenario like this couldn't happen. The dialogue is realistic and never feels cheesy or overly sentimental. There's no one-liners or goofy slapstick here, and it's all the better for it. Cliff Martinez is on scoring duties, and as usual, he never disappoints in creating a unique but still exciting score, which features electric guitars and some cool electronica. There is nothing remotely foreign about the well-known martial artist action star Jackie Chan, as he has been kicking butt and taking numbers mainly in humorous fashion for nearly 50 years. Undoubtedly skillful and infectiously impish throughout his illustrious career in action cinema, Chan, whether in wild, playful mode or pensive yet penetrating form, has seen his share of colorful celluloid mileage as witnessed in his overseas chop-and-pop comedies, Drunken Master, Half a Loaf of Kung Fu, popular American-tailored blockbusters, the Rush Hour series, family animation, Kung Fu Panda series, historical vehicles, 1911, Railroad Tigers, and forgettable and flimsy fare, Around the World in 80 Days, The Tuxedo. Chan may have matured considerably, now 63-year-old, but his remarkable agility, situational instincts on screen, and his inherent ability to energetically entice audiences with his cat-like calisthenics is still a wonder to watch. For the European-based political thriller, The Foreigner, director Martin Campbell, Edge of Darkness, enlists the more serious and retaliatory of Chan's acrobatic stunt-related services. Based on Stephen Leather's 1992 novel The Chinaman, We not only get a vehemently sullen Chan out for revenge in the name of his murdered teen daughter from a deadly terrorist blast, but we also inherit a former Bond performer in the suave Pierce Brosnan, whom Campbell directed in the Agent 007 spy vehicle GoldenEye, as a local politician with a questionable past with subversive operatives. Chan plays Quan Ngoc Min, a Vietnamese immigrant businessman who happens to own a profitable Chinese restaurant in the heart of London. The opening scene starts out innocently enough as proud Papa Quan escorts his teenage daughter Fan, Katie Lung, Harry Potter series, to an eatery, and no sooner than he can finish saying goodbye, a tremendous bomb blasts out of nowhere that results in her death. Obviously devastated and severely distraught, Quan demands answers and wants desperately the heads of those responsible. Naturally, the flustered Quan, settling deeper and deeper into a dangerous combination of depression and rage, cannot seem to get the unresponsive authorities to cooperate with revealing any suitable findings regarding the bombing investigation. Thus, Quan is pushed to the brink of madness and vengeance. Lucky for us, but so much for the terrorists, the recipe for exacting revenge on behalf of the fallen Fan is rather straightforward. The affable Quan, who, coincidentally, was once a Special Forces soldier in the military, aims to collect the bombers' bloody carcasses as penance. The only question remaining is, where does he begin to seek out his young daughter's murderers? Well, since it is revealed that the bombing was executed by the extreme measures of IRA nationalists, our diminutive hero decides the best place to start is with Northern Irish Minister Liam Hennessy, Brosnan, as he once ran with the armed movement back in the day. Hennessy, an ex-terrorist trying to put his explosive, no pun intended, past behind him, already has a lot of personal and professional strife on the plate. Professionally, being caught between English and Irish allegiances as the political tirade escalates, he must balance his governmental duties. On a personal level, Hennessy periodically clashes with his strongly opinionated wife Mary, Orla Brady, into the Badlands TV series, whose political leanings could cause him further scrutiny. An angry Quan demanding his undivided attention is the last thing he wants to or will happily deal with, and so sets the action in motion. Fans of Chan will embrace the virulent change of pace in seeing their high-energy hero take a break from his usual campy-minded confines, but not his animated trademark choreographed martial artistry, even though this potboiler wipes very little dust off of the run-of-the-mill cloak-and-dagger dramatics and rapid-fire bolt-action template that's been used since time immemorial. The Foreigner is well-meaning, but intermittently unbalanced in its taut and twisty high-wire act of double-dealing and collateral damage. The personification of two men's fragile psyches corrupted by the restraints of both their past and present-day disillusionment is effectively compelling, however. Thankfully, an older and bruised Chan's lamenting and grappling Quan brings a poignant sense of emotional and edgy urgency to this tale of loss and tactical intimidation. Brosnan's Hennessy is equally satisfying as the psychologically drained, Downing Street-based centerpiece, trying to tread softly between the English political office he is entrusted to uphold and his nostalgic ties with the notorious IRA antagonists he feels beholden to. With their complementary strengths, the adversaries are the reason the source material elevates it all to something more than a typical out-for-revenge thriller like Taken. The high-octane climatic apartment showdown doesn't hurt the watchability of The Foreigner either. Plot. After a bomb planted by the IRA kills his daughter, a grieving father with a military background makes it his goal to find out who was responsible, a journey that will bring him face-to-face with a government official with old ties to the terrorist organization. This is neither here nor there in terms of its quality, but it should be pointed out that The Foreigner is not really the movie the ads are selling. I walked into it thinking it was a spin on the tired Taken formula, where an older gentleman, retired from his ass-kicking ways, is forced to call upon his special set of skills in order to exact justice on the bad guys who've hurt his family. And while that is partially true of The Foreigner's plot, there is so much more going on than that. If you walk in expecting an action extravaganza, you'll be surprised by how much of the film's runtime is spent in boardrooms and cottages, where heated political strategies and plots unfold between conniving individuals. the older ass-kicker, is often sidelined in his own movie. Sometimes I didn't mind this because another Taken ripoff we do not need. The Foreigner is a lot more convoluted than you might guess, but it also tests your patience with how long it takes to untangle its plot and navigate through its many supporting players. Directed by veteran Martin Campbell, GoldenEye, Casino Royale, The Foreigner gave me mixed feelings often. I appreciated that it wasn't a cheesy knockoff, and yet after a while, I yearned to see the movie come to life in a more superficial way. Just as I settled in for the smart movie, I felt a need for the dumber one to kick into gear. The aforementioned older gentleman in this case is a mysterious man named Quan. He is played by Jackie Chan, who looks every bit his 63 years of age, and it works well here. Wearing a tired, frequently haggard expression throughout, this isn't the fun-loving Chan we're used to, and his performance is actually quite moving at times. Quan certainly has a lot to be sad about. At the beginning of the film, he is front row when a bomb detonated by an upstart faction of the IRA goes off on a London street and kills his young daughter. Already a widower and having lost another child years earlier, Quan moves swiftly into action to find the people responsible. The police are no help. Are they ever? But Quan doesn't need them to zero in on one particular individual whom he thinks can help him, an Irish government official named Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan, who has past ties to the IRA and might know something about the bombers. After being rebuffed by the shady politician, Quan makes it his duty to stealthily stalk and harass him until he gives up the names. Once Brosnan is introduced, the movie basically belongs to him. He has perhaps more screen time than Chan, and the story is more interested in his increasingly desperate maneuverings than anything else. Brosnan is excellent in the role. We see the roguish, charming man we remember as James Bond, but when the heat's on, we see a more sinister and unseemly side. Frankly, Brosnan's turn as Hennessy gave me very strong Bryan Cranston as Walter White vibes throughout. Hennessy is the more interesting character of the two by far, as the movie isn't really concerned with where Quan comes from and where he obtained his training. In fact, the movie barely explains his past, but it's mentioned in passing that he was part of the special forces in the U.S. While Quan sneakily sets about destroying Hennessy's property, he's pretty adept at setting bombs himself. Hennessy scrambles to find out who was really responsible for the bombing, and the Foreigner spends a lot of time with Hennessy's many cohorts, following several subplots and tangents that we struggle to care much about. The real villains of the movie are a barely defined lot, and we're also forced to meet Hennessy's scheming wife, his mistress, his nephew, random politicians, the police, the list goes on. Most of these supporting players are unremarkable. We find that we'd rather get to know Quan, nicknamed the Chinaman, by Hennessy, also the title of the book this is based on, than these sordid folks, since most of these people simply aren't compelling enough to warrant all the time we spend with them. The story finds Quan camped out in the woods for most of the second half, doing a Rambo thing while Hennessy's thugs try to smoke him out. The action during these sections is adequate, if unremarkable, with Chan showing he's still got it when it comes to beating the stuffing out of henchmen. The fight choreography isn't as wildly elaborate as it usually is with a Chan picture. The actor really looks like he's getting hurt this time around, but it's still fun to watch Chan in motion. From an acting standpoint, Chan gets across what he needs to, and is never less than convincing as a man with the weight of the world on his shoulders. But it's definitely Brosnan who steals the show, and while much of what his character says and does is by the numbers, the actor invests in every scene and grabs our attention throughout. The Foreigner sees a couple of up-there actors reminding us why we've been drawn to them for decades, so fans of either, or both, will still have plenty of reason to check this one out. Before the LA premiere of The Foreigner began, the audience received a message from its star, Jackie Chan. Aside from the fighting, he said, "I hope you like my acting." It was a curious request, especially from Chan, whose on-screen work has largely benefited from the fact that we're watching Jackie Chan. You can't help but watch Chan. This is the international superstar's blessing and curse. Jackie is Jackie, no matter the character's name. In Martin Campbell's film, an adaptation of Stephen Leather's novel The Chinaman, Chan plays a soft-spoken man of humility whose life becomes undone when his daughter is killed in an act of terrorism. Kwon Gok-min survived the explosion. He wishes he hadn't. Determined to track down the individuals responsible for this crime, Min embarks on a European journey. It's essentially Taken, except the daughter is already dead. The plot thickens as Min digs deeper into murder. Pierce Brosnan, as Liam Hennessy, emerges as a former IRA member turned British government official. The killers are potentially Irishmen, leading Min to Hennessy. After some diplomatic exchanges, the foreigner turns into a long game of cat and mouse between Hennessy and Min. Min seeks vengeance and justice. Hennessy seeks shelter and tranquility. Neither seem to be getting what they want. By the hour mark, it becomes abundantly clear why this film was made. Jackie Chan wanted it to happen. Everyone else is fairly disposable. The script is written by David Marconi, Live Free or Die Hard, but not even he can seem to keep up with it. It's part Bond movie, part familial drama. Subplots come and go with a haphazard ease. There's a clandestine affair between a married woman and a younger man. There's IRA infighting, a conniving British government, and young Irish terrorists. The foreigner is not short of ideas, just execution. It's such a convoluted dish that it often forgets its main ingredients. At about the 65-minute mark, Chan's character disappears. He is not mentioned, he is not seen, he's not heard from. He performs a remarkable 25-minute vanishing act halfway through the movie. When he reappears, you nearly forget he's the star. Brosnan does what he can to step in. Hennessy is an aging bureaucrat in an unhappy marriage. He's Irish, so he drinks a lot. He's Irish, so he swears a lot. He's Irish, so he's a cliché of every Irishman depicted in contemporary cinema. Marconi's screenplay makes a noble attempt at an exercise in futility, juggling 3 movies in one. The film has the assistance of brilliant ancillary talent. Shot by David Tattersall, Death Note, the British talent knows where to place the camera amid chaotic gunfights. Additionally, the whole piece is scored by Cliff Martinez, the Neon Demon. Even when the dialogue is stiff, Martinez ups the power and punch of a scene through his symphony of sound. It has the feeling of propulsion, even when the movie seems to be running in place. But its central revenge plotline doesn't work. If the foreigner is adamant about telling the story of a widowed father, then so be it. Stick to it. Hone in on Chan's ability to be entertaining and dynamic. Time after time, Campbell refuses to focus the film's attention. When it loses sight, the movie pivots to complex combat sequences. The film opens with a London bombing by a rogue cell of IRA nationalists, which claims a number of lives, including Fan, Katie Leung, the daughter of Chinese-Vietnamese restaurant owner Kwon Gok-min, Chan. A former Special Forces solider whose set of skills is disguised by the humble manner in which he shuffles around, Kwon initially tries bribing the head of the investigation, Commander Bromley, Ray Fearon, to provide him with the names of men responsible. After being told to let the police do their job, he shifts his focus to Northern Irish government official Liam Hennessy, Pierce Brosnan, based on the politician's ex-terrorist past, already dealing with growing internal dissent as he tries to appease both sides of the peace agreement. At a time of crisis, Hennessy must now contend with Kwon's harassment campaign. At times, the Hennessy strand can feel like a condensed mini-series, with an occasionally blustering Brosnan seizing the opportunity to play a steely figurehead who finds his intertwined professional and personal lives coming apart at the seams. Hennessy's problems range from the agenda of his wife Mary, Orla Brady, whose political rage has not been tempered by their now comfortable lifestyle, to being double-crossed by former associates who think he has lost his grit, entailing tough decisions being made with a stiff whiskey in hand. With all of this going on, not to mention pressure from British high-ups to identify the bombers, it's perhaps not surprising that Hennessy and the film itself almost treats Kwon as an aside to a bigger story with Chan absent for some stretches. However, as the threads of Hennessy's tight-knit world come loose, the determined Kwon pulls himself back to narrative center. The Foreigner is directed in no-nonsense fashion by action veteran Martin Campbell, who returns to the fray following the fallout surrounding comic book fiasco The Green Lantern, 2011, and gives the film a flintiness that recalls less his big-screen peaks with the splashy James Bond revivals GoldenEye 1995 and Casino Royale 2006 than his excellent 1980s television work. In a truncated form, Campbell even reprises the haunting scene from his classic miniseries Edge of Darkness 1985, in which the grieving father carefully picks up his daughter's things, trying to connect with whatever remains of her essence. The need to expedite payback means that Chan doesn't have as much time to convey inconsolable loss as Bob Peck did, but is nonetheless effective in quiet close-ups. When it comes to the action scenes, Campbell's unfussy style works well with Chan's choreography. The star's willingness to look his 63 years makes the falls look like they really hurt, and creates a sense of jeopardy when Quan finds himself outnumbered. It's easy for us to appreciate why Hennessy is so annoyed. Every time things threaten to get interesting, Jackie Chan randomly blows something up. It's hard for a movie to maintain its momentum when one of the most iconic stars of the last 35 years keeps detonating minor characters. Imagine how distracting it would be if Jackie Chan popped up in the middle of Jerry Maguire with some fresh Semtex for Jay Moore. Or in The Big Sick, if Jackie Chan bombed Kumail Nanjiani while Kumail Nanjiani was doing some bombing of his own. Yes, the pretense in The Foreigner is a little more forgiving than that, but every time Chan shows up, it feels like he got lost on the set of another film. Even in a thriller that brazenly superimposes 20th century political tensions over the Brexit era, as though the world hasn't changed in the last 25 years, Chan's presence is still pretty jarring. The Foreigner is a twisty political thriller about a deputy minister, Pierce Brosnan, who's plotting to pardon some imprisoned IRA fighters without reigniting the Troubles. The Foreigner is also a revenge saga in which Jackie Chan plays a Vietnamese explosives expert who's obsessively determined to identify and eliminate the bombers who blew up his teenage daughter. Believe it or not, those two narratives don't really complement one another all that well. It turns out there might be a good reason why no one's ever watched In the Name of the Father and thought to themselves, you know what that movie was missing? Jackie Chan. On paper, it almost makes sense why someone would try to sandwich these very different storylines together. Immigrants, so often assumed to be the perpetrators of domestic terrorism, are often the most overlooked of its casualties. And it's possible this mashup feels more organic in The Chinaman, the boldly titled 1992 Stephen Leather novel on which the film is based. Chan's role isn't Chinese in that version either, the point being that the self-absorbed bad guys couldn't care any less. On screen, however, it's like someone closed their eyes, grabbed two random DVDs off the bargain rack at a gas station, and cut them together into a reasonably coherent 114-minute whatever. The two plot strands are ostensibly linked by an act of indiscriminate violence, but they're so clumsily threaded together that it just calls attention to the stitchwork. The Foreigner begins with a bang, setting itself up as yet another in a seemingly endless line of shameless Taken ripoffs, and that's perfectly fine, because Taken is definitely a movie that's missing Jackie Chan. Ngok Min Kwan, Jackie Chan, picks up his teenage daughter from her school in central London and begins driving through town with such paranoia burned into his eyes that it's almost as if he can see the camera lingering on the scene for a few beats too long. The girl pops into a store to buy a prom dress, a bomb swallows her in fire, and Quan suddenly finds himself with a new purpose in life. That's bad news for the young ruffians responsible for the attack, because Quan, wouldn't you know it, has a very special set of skills. It doesn't really matter where he learned them, or against which side of the Vietnam War he ultimately put them to use. All that matters is that he still remembers his training. And when Quan sees Liam Hennessy, Brosnan, lamenting his IRA indiscretions on TV, he decides the politician is probably hiding a few secrets. And he is. In fact, he's hiding so many secrets, and so many secrets are being hid from him, that his political situation quickly becomes the focal point of the film. Brosnan has aged into a gray-bearded character actor who's as good at being shady as he ever was at being suave. Hennessy may be thinly written, but he sure is fun to watch. It's been a long time since he last teamed up with Martin Campbell, But the GoldenEye director still has a keen sense of Brosnan's underlying menace. So much of this movie is sustained by the twitch of the ex-Bond's left eyelid, which Campbell cuts to every time Hennessy is reminded that an unreasonable Vietnamese Rambo has embedded himself in the woods at the end of the driveway. It's easy for us to appreciate why Hennessy is so annoyed. Every time things threaten to get interesting, Jackie Chan randomly blows something up. It's hard for a movie to maintain its momentum when one of the most iconic stars of the last 35 years keeps detonating minor characters. Imagine how distracting it would be if Jackie Chan popped up in the middle of Jerry Maguire with some fresh Semtex for Jay Moore, or, in The Big Sick, if Jackie Chan bombed Kumail Nanjiani while Kumail Nanjiani was doing some bombing of his own. Yes, the pretense in The Foreigner is a little more forgiving than that, but every time Chan shows up, it feels like he got lost on the set of another film. Even in a thriller that brazenly superimposes 20th century political tensions over the Brexit era as though the world hasn't changed in the last 25 years, Chan's presence is still pretty jarring. The Foreigner, courtesy of STXfilms. Chan, on the other hand, really hasn't changed all that much in the last 25 years. He's not quite as nimble as he used to be, though Campbell gives him one delightfully claustrophobic brawl for old time's sake, but he's still larger than life. He doesn't really do subplots, and even in a film that wasn't almost entirely funded by Chinese money, trying to contain him to one would be as futile as trying to beat him in a fistfight. London is one of the most diverse cities on the planet, and there's no reason why a movie set in such a melting pot should feel so unnatural. But screenwriter David Marconi isn't able to draw a dramatically satisfying connection between Hennessy and Kwan, and Chan's outsized screen persona only further upsets the balance. As misjudged as the film may be, however, Campbell is far too competent a director to make something completely without merit. Even Green Lantern has its charms. The Foreigner bumbles forward with the brainless fun of an airport paperback, the kind you might leave in your seat rather than bother to bring home. The entire cast shares Chan's commitment, ensuring that even the most marginal characters leave an impression. And yet, this strange hodgepodge fails what might be its most crucial test. In these uneasy times, you need a damn good reason to fake vivid acts of terrorism around modern-day London. ISIS doesn't get to dictate the details of our entertainment, but that also doesn't mean you can blow up a double-decker bus in a movie without sending out a few shockwaves. Watching something like this, your gut tells you whether or not a piece of entertainment is good enough to earn its imagery. The Foreigner may have been shot before the most recent rash of violence, but it's still too disposable to be this disturbing. Directed by Martin Campbell. Screenplay by David Marconi, based on The Chinaman by Stephen Leather. Produced by Jackie Chan, starring Jackie Chan. Pierce Brosnan. Cinematography David Tattersall. Edited by Angela M. Catanzaro. Music by Cliff Martinez. Production companies Sparkle Roll Media, Wanda Pictures, distributed by Wuzhou Film Distribution China. STX Entertainment United States. Netflix United Kingdom. Release dates 24th of September 2017. 30th of September 2017 China. 13th of October 2017, United States. 15th of December 2017, United Kingdom. Running time 114 minutes. Countries: United Kingdom, China, United States. Language: English. Budget $35 million. Box office $145.4 million.